Hi guys, my name is Escarla. Welcome back to my channel. This is my little crafty corner of the internet where I like to share my making and really anything that comes from my little wild brain. And today I have a very exciting video. It is a long anticipated one, at least for me. We are going to be processing a Shetland fleece. Yay! During my perusal of the internet, I found a lot of different videos on how to scour wool, how to treat Shetland wool, and just a lot of different information to digest. And I figured that it would be really helpful to just gather everything into one video. Also, this would be a great reference for myself down the line if I wonder what I did with a certain fleece. I figured it'd be nice to just document it, share the journey with you guys and any findings I may have. I wanted to split this video up into a few parts. The first part being a little background on Shetland Sheep and all of my research findings that I discovered. And then we'll get into the picking and soaking and scouring and combing and spinning of the fleece. I intend to show you guys a small sample at the end, so stay tuned for that. And without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, so before we get started on the processing of my fleece, I wanted to share some information that I discovered along the way. I did quite a bit of research to figure out how to properly treat my fleece, and I learned some very interesting things about Shetland and Shetland fleece. Much of my research came from the Fleece and Fiber Sourcebook by Deborah Robson and Carol Icarius. I really hope I'm saying that right. But those of you who don't know, this is basically like the holy grail of everything fibery and sheep breed related. There's a lot of amazing information in here about basically most breeds of sheep. So I'll link this down below, and I'll also share some useful videos that I discovered and different articles too that shared a lot of really good information. So definitely check out the description below. So a little bit about Shetland. Shetland is a 100+ archipelago. It is roughly 100 miles from Scotland. I believe a lot of it is uninhabited, but about 15 of the islands themselves are inhabited by people. The sheep themselves have lived on the island for well over 1,000 years, and they've adapted to the really harsh and cold climates that exist there. They are on the smaller side in terms of sheep. The rams weigh between 90 and 125 pounds, and the ewes weigh between 75 and 100 pounds. So their fleeces vary between 2 to 4 pounds. They also vary in crimp from really wavy to really straight parts of the fleece, with an average staple length between 3 and 5 inches. There are 11 plus colors and a billion different names for all the different varieties of Shetland. So really any color you can imagine in the natural occurring sheepy world exists in Shetland. So that makes it very versatile for, many different looks. But traditionally the white fleece is the one that is mostly bred because obviously you can dye it and do a lot more with the white fleece. The Shetland fiber is considered one of the finest in the British Isles. I'm sure many of you guys have heard of Shetland lace shawls, and if you haven't, please look it up. I'll put some images here as well so you can look at them. One of the distinguishing factors of a Shetland shawl is the ability to pull it through a ring, and traditionally they were considered heirlooms. And I'll link a video down below that I found from the BBC archives. It's super fascinating, and it talks about how Shetland lace shawls were valued more than gold at one point in history, and that's just super fascinating to me. I would want to maybe experiment down the line and knit myself a Shetland wedding shawl, but I do want to do that with a white fleece, so I would probably end up buying some comb top or something to spin that with, but that's a project for the future. I have so many plans. So there are 3 types of Shetland fleeces. There's kindly single coated, and those are usually a very short staple length and very, very crimpy. Then there's the long wool / wavy, which is medium in length. I do think my fleece would fall under this category, and there are sections of it that may be double coated, but most of it is single coated. The third category would be beaver / primitive / double coated, which is a very long staple length, usually very straight, And as I said, it's double coated, so processing is a little bit more complicated because you have to separate the longer fibers from the short ones. But you can always choose to blend them anyway, but depending on what you want to make, you may consider separating the longer wool from the smaller bits. So that was something I found very interesting, is that not all Shetland fleeces are double coated. I was very nervous about processing this fleece and obviously did my research to make sure that I knew how to process it correctly. But don't be afraid of double coated fleeces. I think if it's like an Icelandic type of sheep, then it might be a little bit more work. But a lot of these fleeces that you find at these fiber festivals, especially at Rhinebeck, where I feel like there's a very high caliber of fleeces available, you will usually find that they are single coated. But again, certain parts of the fleece might be double coated, so just keep that in mind. An interesting thing I also came across was something called ruing. So Shetland sheep are one of those breeds that are actually able to shed their own fleece. So ruing is essentially plucking away the old fleece directly from the sheep, and it doesn't hurt them because essentially their bodies just shed it at a certain time of year. I believe a lot of breeders are aware of when their sheep start ruing, so they make sure to have them sheared before that happens. But traditionally, people used to just rue the sheep and then just process. Nowadays, when we think of Shetland wool, we think of like Fair Isle patterns and Jameson and Smith. And some fun facts about those: Fair Isle is actually the southernmost island in the Shetland Islands, and Jameson and Smith actually purchases about 80% of the wool grown on the islands. So that's really fascinating. That's quite a large percentage. But the sheep that I purchased was purchased at Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool Festival this past October of 2023. And it was purchased from Beald Farm, which is in Clinton Corners, New York. I looked up their Facebook and they have lots of cute pictures of the sheep. And there's one that I suspect is my fleece, but I'm not quite sure. I should probably ask. You'll notice I didn't really get into micron counts or any of that, but you can find quite a variety of different microns. And microns are essentially how thin the fiber, like one strand of the sheep is. And usually it's between, I don't know, I think like 19 to like 30 or something microns. The higher the number, the finer the wool. I know there's some sort of method in terms of figuring out the micron count of your fleece and of the sheep you have, but I don't really know that, so I'm sorry I can't dive too into that. But yeah, I hope you guys found these little fun facts interesting. I definitely learned quite a bit. I wanted to make sure to include this segment because there's a lot of different information to filter through online, and I found it just really fascinating. So definitely check out the description for different articles I found very useful, and also a bunch of really cool videos that I discovered about Shetland and Shetland lace and all that jazz. So let's move on to the processing. Bye-bye. The time has come. We're finally processing the Shetland fleece that I got at Rhinebeck this past October. It has now been like 2 months since this bag has been staring at me, and I think it's time we finally process it. I truly fell in love with this fleece because of the color. It is a black sheep. It might be a very dark brown. I don't think any sheep is pure black, but I'm not sure. This will be the third fleece that I process, so I'm not an expert at all, but this is how I am going to decide to tackle this. I pulled out a lock from the fleece, and it's looking like we are about 4.5-inch staple length, which I think is perfect for combing. So we're gonna spread out this fleece on the ground, sort it out, see what parts we wanna process together, and we'll go through that process. Now this is a 3-pound fleece. It cost me $86.50, and it got a really good scorecard. Let's get in here. First impression is it smells a lot more intense than any of the other fleeces I've processed, and I'm trying to be as gentle as possible to open this without kind of breaking it off too much. The fleece is quite compacted from me traveling with it. So when I bought this fleece, I literally had to carry it around like all of New York City. I had gone for the weekend, stayed upstate with my best friend, and then had to go back into the city. So I think that kind of compacted it a lot more than I would like. And I don't think I'm gonna be able to lay this out in a proper manner. That's okay. Do what we can. This fleece actually isn't too lanolin-y, if that's a word. And I've only ever processed a Uradale fleece. That was a 10-pound fleece. I don't know what the hell was up in my head.
Not make consent for, like, you don't just say, oh, I'm gonna be giving this, like, charity a bunch of, like, it's like she's taking a charity who is reputable, which I did research into the charity, we'll talk about it in a second, but it's a reputable charity.
Excuse me, Rocky? No. But that was the first fleece I ever processed in my tiny Brooklyn apartment at the time. The second fleece I processed was a CVM, California Variegated Mutant. It is a beautiful, beautiful gray fleece that I bought last year, I guess technically 2 years ago now. That one I washed really well and I was very proud of it. The first fleece I ever bought, I washed in like batches like this. I just kind of grabbed clunks of it and washed it. The second batch I did, I followed some of Taylor E. Owen's recommendations and I kind of divvied everything up into locks and then kind of flicked the ends out a bit and then washed it. This fleece doesn't have a lot of dirt or anything. It's super clean. I'm actually very, very impressed. I really love the Rhinebeck Sheep and Wool Festival fleeces because it seems like they really prepare the fleeces really well for the hand spinner. There's a lot less VM in it. It definitely looks like this fleece was covered or looks like it wore a jacket or whatever. But yeah, it looks to be in really great condition, really easy to spin. So I don't think I'm gonna need to like flick any of these ends, but I will divvy everything up into little bunches to make this process much easier. So yeah, I think this is the best I can do. I don't think I'm gonna be able to lay this out in the way it was shorn just because the bag got quite compacted. So let me give you guys a close-up of what the fleece looks like. I don't know if you guys can tell, but on camera it's looking a lot more like a dark brown, but in person it looks much deeper. It's probably, let me see if I can, yeah, technically it looks more like this in person. So I think I'm just gonna have to intuitively divvy this up in a manner that makes sense for me. Okay, I wanted to show you guys some different sections I pulled from the fleece. This piece seems to be more compacted and much more smoother, like less crimpy than the other parts. This might be the area where the sheep like to lay, and it's a really long staple length. As you can see, the staple length there is much longer than, for example, this piece. And you can see this other section is much more crimpier up top. And then we also have this example of another like crimpier, shorter bit. So I'll divide everything with staple length. So this longer staple length would be ideal for hand combing. And then these shorter bits I would probably be carding. And as we go, I'll be removing these little neps and any like second cuts. I apologize if any of my terminology is off. It has been quite a while since I've deep dived into processing, so my terminology is not as in my brain as it used to be. I think you do have to have a great deal of patience to process a fleece this way, but lucky for us, I have a shit ton of patience. So these are all pretty long bits. I also kind of like to fluff out the part that was cut. It just makes it easier to wash and for the water to get through. All right, so I'm gonna continue doing this off screen and I'll be back. I have divvied up my fleece into different sections. Now this is only part of the fleece because this is a very tedious and time-consuming process, as you just saw in the last clip. I'll explain the piles that I've organized everything in. This section here are kind of the longer and straighter bits of fiber. The staple length is quite long. I would say they're probably about 5 inches or so. So I will definitely be combing this. Here I've divvied up the crimpier bits of the wool, and this would be great to card as well. The staple length is quite long. This pile here is also long enough to card, but the ends are much more curlier and will likely require a little bit more work on my part to just kind of flick those ends open and get them nice and clean. So I've separated that as well. This here are a bunch of shorter ends. It also feels much softer. This might be some of the wool around the neck, and I feel like I'm gonna have to card these because it's a bit short. Here are some of the ends and second cuts that I've come across. To be honest, this fleece has a lot more second cuts than any of the past fleeces I've had. And then over here is how much I have left. So as you can see, it looks like I've barely made a dent. I did kind of pile it all up a little bit more, but we do have quite a ways to go to work through this fleece. Because this is such a kind of time-consuming process, you do want to make sure to be careful and take your time, because my biggest mistake when I first scoured my first fleece was doing it too quickly, and then the fleece just ended up having a lot of lanolin, and I had to rewash it, and I feel like I have to wash it a third time. So yeah, take the time. If you're choosing to spin your own yarn from fleece, then just take the time. It's already going to be a long process, so just embrace it. All right, so here are all of them side by side, so you can kind of see where my logic was coming from. You can see this one's much longer. It's kind of my longest staple length. This pile and this pile are very similar, but this pile definitely has a lot more like curly cues at the bottom that I need to work through. Then this is kind of the crimpiest bit, and then these are the shortest bits. So for the purposes of our example, I'm just gonna go ahead and wash this longer pile and only work with a small quantity so that I'm able to actually show you guys. So I've gone and gotten myself a mesh bag, just a typical laundry mesh bag. This one has slightly larger holes, which is perfect for any debris to fall out of. But I'm just gonna go ahead and take a bundle and start laying these out in here. You wanna make sure that you line everything up in the same direction because it'll just keep you organized and keep everything nice and neat. You don't wanna overstuff the laundry bag because you want to have enough space in there for the water to kind of just go over the fiber nice and easily. So just be mindful of not overstuffing. I will weigh this just so we see how much we have in the bag before I get it soaked. Okay, so like I said, we are first going to weigh this just to see how much lanolin we use and the amount of weight that shifts with the Shetland. So I'm gonna use my kitchen scale. So it's looking like 155 grams is what we have before washing. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and soak the fleece. And I'm just gonna be gentle to just kind of try and let it keep its shape. And again, this is a cold soak. I'm using my hands, but if you're grossed out, just use like a stick or something to push this down and get all of the fiber nice and wet. So I think you can see the water is now already becoming quite dirty, or a bit dirty here. For the purposes of this video, I'm gonna let this soak a couple of hours and then we'll get into the actual washing of the fleece. Typically, I would let this soak overnight so that it has the most amount of time of pre-soaking, but I do want to get the most of this film today so that I could then work on spinning tomorrow. I'm gonna go get some Shake Shack and I'll be back later. Hi guys, so I am back and we have our soaked fleece here. Again, I recommend soaking overnight, but for the purposes of this video, I only soaked for 2 hours. We'll see how that plays a part later down the line, but apparently pre-soaking really helps melt off any like dry clay or like dry poopy bits that might set into the fleece with the hot water. So I do recommend pre-soaking for overnight. We're going to remove the fleece from this dirty water and remove any excess here with my salad spinner that I specifically use for wool, and that'll help get the excess water out. If you have a rinse spin cycle on your dryer, you can do that as well. Just make sure you don't use any heat. And yeah, so let's do that now. You'll see how dirty this water is from just 2 hours. And we're gonna lift this out of the water. Look at how dirty that is. And I'm just quickly adding it here to the spinner. You can see how much water this gets out. I'm gonna do this a few times. So now that this is done, I'm gonna prepare the water to actually scour the lanolin off. So here's the dirty fleece water. You can especially tell here on the sides how dirty it really is. And you can use this water to water your plants, and it'll fertilize them and make them very happy. So I plan to do just that with this water. So over here you can see that I have one of these like baking things. I looked into this for dyeing, but also so that I could heat my fleeces up. In the past, I've used the hottest tap water possible and then added boiling water to it, but I do think it is better to maintain the temperature, and ideally you want to go for between 140 to 160 degrees. You don't want it to go any lower than 140. But we're just gonna, I have the burners on at 2, which is almost next to low, and I just want to get this water heated up to about 160 degrees. All right guys, I think we are about ready to add the fleece. Let's check the temp here. Turn the light on so you can see. We are at about 151 degrees. I'm gonna switch this to low. You basically want to keep the water between 140 and 160. So we're going to keep it here. I'm going to keep this on a low heat. And now we're going to add our scouring solution. And I like to use Unicorn Fibers Power Scour. And you just use 1 tablespoon to 2 gallons of water. And you'll see the water becomes soapy and a little bit cloudier. And the fleece is still a little bit cold, so literally do not touch this. I'm just adding it in. All right, so this will be our first wash. I am gonna let this sit here for 20 minutes, and I'll periodically check the temperature to make sure we're still in our mark. So I'm just gonna set my timer here. Okay, it's 20 minutes. So let's get this fleece out of there. I'm gonna use some gloves just to protect my little phalanges from burning. I also have these tongs that I like to use specifically for this purpose or for dyeing or whatever. I'm gonna turn the heat off of this. And now I'm just gonna kind of pat everything through to just kind of shake things up. Lift. We're putting that there, and here is the dirty water. Now you want to get rid of this properly. If you have septic, you do not want to throw this down the drain. Oh, this isn't that hot. I thought this was really hot, but it's not. You could also throw this water outside, which I think is what I'm gonna do. So I will be back and we will do our second batch, but I'll give you guys a close-up. Here's what the water looks like after wash numero 1, okay? So you're gonna go ahead and add half of the amount, so half a tablespoon. This is half the amount of power scour. The fleece wasn't that greasy, so I don't think it needs, you know, the full amount. If you have a very greasy fleece, you might want to do the process 3 times and do a full tablespoon for the second wash and then half a tablespoon for the third wash and then do your rinse. We have another 20 minutes down. All right, so here's wash number 2. That's what the water's looking like. Now I'm gonna go dump this and we'll do our final rinse. Hello, so this is the final rinse. I'm so excited. I just put really hot tap water, which apparently is around 135 degrees for me, and we'll just soak this again. We are now gonna do the final soak for 20 more minutes. So in total, this takes about 60 minutes to wash. And this is just a regular rinse with no soap in it. All right, so this is our last wash. So this is just the rinse water. And the water actually looks quite clear, which makes me happy and tells me that we washed this really well. I'm just gonna gently squeeze out the water and grab my salad spinner. That's better. All right, so at this point, we're just gonna lay out the fleece to dry, and I'm just gonna let it hang out here overnight.
Seems to be like a Persona Studio 24C or Motu M4.
All right, guys, I am properly exhausted now. That was a lot to squeeze everything into one night, but we now have a small batch for me to work with tomorrow, and we're going to comb that fiber and spin a sample. I'm very excited. I made sure to pick the longest staple length so I could use my combs, but yeah, tomorrow we'll go ahead and comb that and spin a sample, and I think I'm gonna go for like a fingering weight yarn. So yeah, now I gotta clean up this mess. So I will see you guys tomorrow.
The next day.
Greetings, it is the next day, and we have some nice and clean fleece to card today, to comb. I always say card instead of comb and comb instead of card, but we're going to be combing this fleece now. I am very, very happy to report that this is truly a black fleece. Technically, it's an insanely dark brown, but it looks pretty dang black. A lot of the footage looked a lot more brown, but this is actually pretty color accurate now that there's like daytime lighting. These are my wool combs. I got these on Paradise Fiber a few years back, and ideally I would have liked some Valkyrie fine combs, but they were like out of stock at the time, and I figured that it would be better to get something that would work with a lot of different types of sheep fleece. So I went with these, and these are just kind of like your standard, what are these called? Double wool combs. I'll put the correct terminology on the screen, but these do have, oh my God, maybe don't point it at your face. These do have a little hole in them, and they do sell like something that holds down the comb onto your working table, but I never bought that. I instead use clamps, which I'll show you how I clamp everything down. And yeah, The plan today is to comb this out, figure out if we have like a double fleece situation. There are a lot of second cuts on this fleece, unfortunately. Definitely more than I've ever experienced in past fleeces, which I've only worked with 2 other fleeces, so I don't really have a lot to go off of. But yeah, I'll get you guys up close and personal and we will start combing this. The goal is to spin a small sample today, and I will also weigh this to see how much we have to work with, since yesterday I believe we had 155 grams of fleece before washing. So the lanolin does add quite a bit of weight. So we will see where we're at now. Here's the dried fleece. You can see it's nice and fluffy and it's divvied up into little tufts of wool that will make our combing process much easier. So let's set up the combs and we will work on this beautiful fleece. All right guys, so let's see what we ended up with here. All right, so it looks like we have 93 grams of wool. So that was about almost 60 grams of just grease on that. That's pretty intense. We will divide the combed fleece, not this fleece, because I'm sure there's going to be some waste associated with this. So yeah, let's get to combing. Okay guys, so I kind of forgot how I had clamped this down, but this is the way that I have to do it because the wood is too thick to hold on to both the table and the end of the carders. But I do recommend, like for safety purposes, it is much better to clamp things down like right here than where I'm currently doing it. But yeah, I'm just gonna do what I can. So that is how we are doing it. All right guys, so we have our comb here nice and sturdy and we have our fleece. So let's go ahead and load this up. Now from the last time I did this, what I do is put the cut ends facing in here and I leave about, I don't know, about ½ inch or so. Then we're gonna pack this up. So we have our comb all loaded up here, and now we'll start the process. All right, so with your comb, you want to be very careful and always aim this away from you. We're just kind of gently going to start combing. And I gotta say, this is going much more smoother than in the past. And you'll notice that your fiber that you're combing is quite staticky, so I just kind of pet it a little bit as I go. Now maybe this is the double coated part because you can see that I've gathered quite a bit here. But we have these shorter bits over here. So that's interesting. Keep on combing. But yeah, this is looking like the short ends here. So I guess I will take these shorter bits. They're not really coming off that well, so I'm gonna get closer here to the tines. Okay. So as you can see, I am left with these shorter kind of 1 inch staple length. I'm gonna save these shorter bits for carding later because I don't wanna waste very much, but you can see that all of this is about 1 inch long. So we'll set this aside, but now that I have my cards loaded, we're gonna load them back into the comb like this. Some people like to use water to just keep the static at bay, but I'm not gonna do that. You do wanna kind of flip over your comb every so often, and these fluffy bits I will also set aside because It's kind of like the dirt part. Now I'm gonna go through one more time. Now when you comb your fiber, it basically makes it all line up and create a very nice worsted, flat kind of finished yarn instead of a woolen preparation. I have a soft spot for both, but obviously since a lot of the staple lengths for this was quite long, I feel like it works best to comb that. If you try to card a staple length that's too long, you end up with a big mess. It just kind of tangles up. It's not the most ideal situation. And you can see that there's even more kind of waste here. I'm gonna try and get as much off as I can, trying to remember to be gentle. Sometimes I just kind of help it out a little bit by pulling at it. And again, this is considered some more waste. Now I'm gonna load it back in here. You want to start like gently at the ends. All right, and this is looking pretty clean after this pass. We don't have many nappy bits or anything like that. Makes me happy. Now that this is all set, you can use a diz, which I'll show you what a diz is, 1 second. So this is my little tool that I use for spinning, and it does come with these little holes in them, and this is what a diz is called. You basically, I'll give you an example, you basically kind of take a little end here. Honestly, a crochet hook would be very helpful right now. Let me grab one. Here's a crochet hook, make my life a little easier. So you can just drive this in and pull it out. And then you just kind of pull and pull this forward. Wow, this is so soft and silky. I feel like the diz is nice because it does kind of smooth the yarn a little bit. Now it kind of just ended there, but I'll get the rest of this off. And now all I like to do is create like a little nest. And I do like to take the end a little bit and just spin it up so I know where to start. And here's our little nest. Okay. I guess my technique is kind of combing at the ends and then twisting a little bit as you pull to just help it get off of the other comb. And this method is great because you end up losing a lot of the vegetable matter as you work through this. But this fleece feels really clean. It feels really smooth. The last time I combed a fleece was my Uradale, and I did not get the lanolin right. Like, I didn't get all the lanolin removed accurately. So I feel like it ended up becoming a nightmare. There's a little seed in here. It ended up becoming a nightmare to work with and to comb. You can probably tell that one of these tines is like a little bit off, and it's because of that fleece, because I was freaking fighting against the combs. So I do recommend making sure you check the temperature of your water and get all that lanolin off accurately. Otherwise, you're gonna have to do double the work, which I definitely did. And even so, I'm gonna have to do it a third time because I was still being stubborn. All right, so I'm gonna save this one here. Here we go. So as you guys can see here, this is kind of the ends that are left, and you can see there's quite a bit of VM and hay pieces in there. So I won't be using these bits for combing, but anything that looks fairly clean I will save. But yeah, as you can see, all of these have kind of like that leftover dirt and nappy bits. So I would consider that waste.
You're never going to get these in. So now I'll go to my water cup.
I have. The doctor put me on a diet.
A lot more water. And I don't have any. And then at work,
It's about a fingering to a light fingering weight. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you reaching the end. I hope this video was informative and helpful for you. I am really pleased with this black sheep. Comment down below if you're the black sheep of your family. I certainly am. But yeah, thank you guys again for being here. If you haven't done so already, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. It means the world to me. My dream was always to make a YouTube channel that was happy and uplifting and creative and inspiring. So I hope that I can do that here for you. And you can also find me on Instagram as Starseed Creations for more daily stories. And yeah, until next week, happy crafting, happy making, happy scouring, and I'll see you next week. Bye guys.